Myles Garrett is already the greatest pass rusher in NFL history.
Come on!
I know. That seems like a crazy statement. From escaping drug addiction, nearly ruining his entire career, and being overlooked by the entire sports world, Myles continues to rewrite the record books due to one single reason that nobody is talking about. But to understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Myles Lorenz Garrett was born on December 29th, 1995 in Arlington, Texas. Now, Myles didn't have an ordinary childhood. He was born into a family of elite athletes who each carry their own gift. His mother, Audrey Garrett, was an All-American track star at Hampton University, showcasing pure speed and explosiveness. His father, Lawrence Garrett, played basketball at UC Riverside and had elite coordination and footwork. His half-brother, Sean Williams, was the 17th overall pick in the 2007 NBA Draft by the New Jersey Nets and displayed size and length. And his sister, Bree Garrett, would go on to win the 2014 NCAA championship in the 20-pound weight throw at Texas A&M, flexing her raw, devastating power. With genetics like that, you'd think Myles was destined to follow in one of their footsteps. Maybe basketball like his brother, or track like his mother. But Myles didn't just inherit one of their gifts, he inherited all of them.
Myles Garrett has got him again!
By age 12, Myles could dunk a basketball. His father Lawrence watched it happen and immediately realized, we might have something here. The athletic dynasty had created its ultimate product, but the life lessons he would use to dominate the NFL with weren't football related at all. The most important influence on young Myles' life? His grandmother Juanita, who Myles referred to as Gran. When he was just 8 years old, she started teaching him to write poetry. No TV, no distractions. Just the two of them, putting words on paper. We didn't have much else to do, Garrett later recalled. We'd sit together and write. Then one day, Gran showed him a documentary called Ali Rap about Muhammad Ali's gift for words. Young Myles watched the greatest fighter of all time recite poetry, talk trash with rhythm, and tell stories that moved people. It changed everything. In that moment, Myles realized something that most athletes never understand. You don't have to choose between being a warrior and being an artist. You can be both.
Trying to come back the other way, and Myles Garrett is there!
Gran planted a seed that day. The idea that violence and vulnerability, power and poetry could exist in the same person, but not everyone in the family would teach Myles through inspiration. Now you'd think having a brother who was the 17th pick in the NBA draft would be an ultimate blueprint for success.
From 6, there's a prayer from Sean.
And in a way, Sean Williams was. Just not in the way you'd expect. Sean had all the talent in the world. 6'10", athletic, lottery pick potential realized. But his career was derailed by marijuana suspensions and off-court issues. The NBA dream that should have lasted a decade only made it past a few seasons. Young Myles watched it all happen. Then one day, when Myles was just 11 years old, he found Sean smoking. Most little brothers would look the other way. Myles didn't. He took Sean's weed and his lighter, hid them, and refused to give them back, even when Sean destroyed his entire bedroom looking for them. 11 years old, standing up to his NBA playing older brother, refusing to enable him. My brother was an example for what not to do, Garrett later explained, saying, "The weed, it's a distraction. I don't want any of that to distract me from my main goal, which is going to the NFL and being the best defensive lineman or player who ever played." To this day, Myles Garrett has never smoked, never drank, never let anything cloud his focus. Gran gave him his soul. Sean showed him what happens when you lose your way. He was forced to grow up at a young age, but life wasn't done throwing him curveballs.
The way that he was tackled.
Oh, God!
Now, having elite genes is one thing. Translating them into football dominance, that's something else entirely. When Myles arrived at Martin High School in Arlington, he was just another freshman with potential. Sure, he was big for his age. Sure, he was athletic. But so are a lot of kids who never amount to anything. That changed quickly. By his sophomore year, Myles wasn't just playing varsity, he was terrorizing it. Football, basketball, track, it didn't matter the sport, he dominated everything he touched. Football was different. On the football field, Myles Garrett looked like a man playing against children. He had 5 unique traits that allowed him to bully other human beings on the gridiron. Garrett finished his high school career with 172 tackles and 33.5 sacks. Those numbers are absurd, but they don't tell the full story. In one game against Weatherford, Myles put up a stat line that looked like a typo. 13 tackles and 9 tackles for loss. That's not bad. 2 forced fumbles, 1 blocked punt, even better. But here's the kicker. He had 8.5 sacks in one game. A rival coach who played against him that year said it best. That's not a high school kid. That's a grown-ass man. At 6'4", 272 pounds, he could run a 4.64 40-yard dash. That's faster than most NFL tight ends while being heavier than most NFL linebackers. But it wasn't just the speed, it was everything. 41-inch vertical jump, 10'8" broad jump, 35.25-inch arms that seem to go on forever. Most athletes are either big and strong or fast and explosive. Myles Garrett was all of it at 17 years old. The question was no longer whether he'd played college football, it was which program would be lucky enough to get him. He was a national phenomenon. The accolades piled up, and every major program came calling. Texas, Alabama, USC, Ohio State, you name it, they wanted Myles Garrett. And why wouldn't they? This was a once-in-a-generation prospect, a player who could transform a defense from day one. The kind of recruit that head coaches fly across the country to meet. The kind of talent that makes or breaks recruiting classes. But here's the thing about Myles. He didn't want the easy path. A lot of 5-star recruits pick programs where they could dominate immediately, where the spotlight is already bright, where they can coast on talent alone. Myles looked at the map and asked a different question. Where would he face the toughest competition? The answer was obvious. The SEC.
Alec throws. Incomplete as Joe.
Texas A&M made sense for other reasons too. His sister Bree was already there, dominating in track and field. The coaching staff had a plan for him. The fit felt right. Myles Garrett wanted to prove that he could hang with the best defensive players in the country. He wanted to face SEC offensive lines, the biggest, the strongest, the most NFL ready. He wanted to earn it. I wanted that SEC competition, Garrett later explained. I wanted to prove I belonged against the best. The stage was set. The expectations were sky high. Now all Myles had to do was live up to them, but it would be easier said than done.
Michigan at the 41. What a hit!
This is Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney had just gone #1 overall to the Houston Texans after terrorizing the SEC for 3 years. His freshman sack record, 8 sacks, was considered untouchable, set by a generational freak who had his own SportsCenter segment. That was the bar. Most freshmen ease into college football. They learn the playbook. They adjust to the speed. They wait their turn. Myles Garrett didn't have time for that. He started the season as a backup. By game 3, he was in the rotation. By game 5, he was a starter. And then he went to work.
The defensive ends go on a play fake and right in the back.
Sack after sack after sack. Offensive tackles who had handled everyone else suddenly looked helpless. Quarterbacks who had all day against other defenses were running for their lives. By his 9th game, just his 5th start, Myles Garrett had broken Jadeveon Clowney's SEC freshman sack record. 9 games, 5 starts. record broken. He didn't just break the record, he finished with 11.5 sacks, nearly 50% more than Clowney's mark. Scouts who had come to evaluate seniors left talking about the freshmen. NFL draft analysts who usually ignore first-year players started making projections. This kid could be the #1 overall pick in 3 years. But Myles wasn't satisfied with breaking Clowney's record. He wanted to prove it wasn't a fluke. But here's the thing about breakout seasons. They usually don't last. Coordinators study the tape. Offensive lines scheme specifically for you. Double teams become triple teams. The element of surprise disappears completely. That's what happened to most one-year wonders, but Myles Garrett isn't most players.
And Myles Garrett is making an impact on the game.
His sophomore season wasn't just good, it was a complete takeover of the SEC. He led the entire conference in sacks, tackles for loss, and forced fumbles. Not top 5, not top 3. First in everything. SEC Defensive Player of the Year finalist. Unanimous All-American. The most dominant defensive player in college football. Most pass rushers rely on one thing: speed, power, or a signature move. Myles Garrett studied the position like a scientist. While other players watch film to prepare, Garrett analyzed it. He broke down blocking schemes like chess matches. He borrowed moves from basketball, the Euro step, hesitation, the crossover, the change of direction. He diagnosed plays before the ball was even snapped. His defensive line coach at Texas A&M said, "One of the smartest football players I've ever been around. He understands how people are trying to scheme him up." And off the field, he was just as unusual. He wrote 3 to 4 poems by week, by hand, because it feels like it's flowing through me better. He corresponded with paleontologists at major universities about dinosaur discoveries. He wasn't just planning for the NFL, he was planning for life after football. His life plan made at age 14, I knew I wanted to play ball, be a paleontologist, and write poetry. I thought, heck, where will I find the time? Well, football comes first, poetry second, and paleontology can come at the end. A violent predator with a poet's soul and a scientist's mind. Nothing could stop the man hunting down quarterbacks at 15 miles per hour. Well, not everything. Myles Garrett's junior season didn't go according to plan. An ankle injury nagged him all year, limiting him to just 8.5 sacks. Still elite, still first team All-American, but not the 12+ sacks everyone expected. The whispers started. Was he injury prone? Had defenses figured him out? Was the hype overblown? In Indianapolis, in front of every NFL scout, coach, and general manager, Myles Garrett didn't just answer the questions, he ended the conversation entirely. One scout watched his workout and turned to a colleague, saying, "We can all go home now." NFL media research tried to put the numbers into perspective. At 272 pounds, Myles Garrett was taller than Julio Jones, heavier than Rob Gronkowski, quicker than Devontae Freeman, faster than Jarvis Landry, all in one body. Mel Kiper Jr. made it official. No brainer. Garrett is the best prospect in this class, a superb pass rusher and rare talent. The poet from Arlington was headed to the NFL, but no amount of poetry could calm him down for the chaos in Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns had the #1 overall pick in 2017. This was supposed to be the moment everything changed. Cleveland hadn't made the playoffs since 2002. They'd cycled through 28 starting quarterbacks since 1999. The franchise was a punchline, the place where careers went to die. But Myles Garrett, he was supposed to fix all of that. The commissioner walked to the podium. The card was revealed. With the first pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns select Myles Garrett, defensive end, Texas A&M. Myles celebrated with his family, smiled for the cameras, and prepared to save a franchise. Then he actually got to Cleveland. His rookie season was a nightmare, but not because of him. An ankle sprain cost him 4 games. A concussion cost him another. When he was healthy, he produced 7 sacks in just 11 games, a pace that would have put him among the league leaders over a full season. But the Browns went 0-16, the worst record in NFL history. 0 wins, 16 losses. A historically bad team that couldn't get out of its own way. Myles Garrett was everything he was supposed to be. It didn't matter. He had dominated at every level he played at. High school, college, now the NFL. But for the first time in his life, dominance wasn't enough. A lot of players would have crumbled in Cleveland. The losing, the dysfunction, the revolving door of coaches and quarterbacks. It breaks people. Myles Garrett refused to let it break him. In his second season, he exploded for 13.5 sacks and 44 tackles. First Pro Bowl selection, named defensive captain at just 22 years old. It didn't matter that the Browns were 7-8-1. It didn't matter that the organization was still finding its footing. Myles Garrett was a problem that offensive coordinators couldn't solve. By 2019, the hype was reaching a fever pitch. The Browns had finally assembled talent around him. Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham Jr., Nick Chubb. The national media picked them as a playoff team. ESPN couldn't stop talking about Cleveland. And Myles was playing the best football of his life. Through 10 games, he had 10 sacks. He was on pace for a career year. Nothing could stop him. Well, except himself. November 14th, week 11, Thursday night football. Browns versus Steelers. Cleveland was winning. The game was over. Myles Garrett did what he'd done thousands of times before. He rushed the quarterback Mason Rudolph and brought him to the ground. What happened next would change his life. Rudolph grabbed at Garrett's helmet. Garrett ripped Rudolph's helmet off. Then, when Rudolph charged at him, Myles Garrett swung the helmet and struck Mason Rudolph in the head. An unprotected head on national television with the whole world watching. The brawl that followed was chaos. Punches thrown, players ejected, coaches screaming. But none of that mattered. The only image anyone would remember was Myles Garrett swinging a helmet like a weapon. Years later, that's still the top autocomplete result when you search up Myles. The punishment was swift and severe. Indefinite suspension, the longest for a single on-field incident in NFL history. His entire salary gone for a year. His reputation in absolute ruins. Garrett later alleged that Rudolph had used a racial slur, a claim Rudolph denied and the NFL found no evidence to support. But regardless of what was said, the action was indefensible, and Myles knew it. I apologize. There's no need for that kind of violence. That was outside the game of football, and it was idiotic, foolish, childish. I would never, in my right mind, ever try to do something like that again. The man who never lost control, lost control. The poet who wrote about vulnerability showed the ugliest kind of strength. He considered retiring. Walking away from football entirely. The shame was that overwhelming. But Gran didn't raise a quitter, and Myles had to prove that one moment doesn't define an entire career. February 2020, Myles Garrett was allowed to play football again, but the stain remained. Every article mentioned it. Every broadcast replayed it. Every opposing fan base chanted about it. Myles Garrett wasn't the poet or the paleontologist anymore. He was the guy who swung the helmet. A lot of players would have crumbled under that weight. They would have made excuses, blamed others, and let the criticism eat them alive. Myles didn't say a word. He just went to work. The Browns believed in him, signing him to a 5-year, $125 million extension that July. Now it was time to prove that they were right. 5 seasons afterwards, 0 incidents, 4 first-team All-Pro selections, and in 2023, Myles Garrett became the first Cleveland Brown in franchise history to win Defensive Player of the Year. Not despite what happened, because of how he responded to it. Here's what makes Myles Garrett truly terrifying. It's not one dominant season. It's not a hot streak. It's the same thing year after year, no matter what's happening around him. He's the only player in NFL history with 14 or more sacks in 4 consecutive seasons. 12 or more sacks in 6 consecutive seasons. 6 straight years with a 90 or above PFF pass rushing grade. Offensive coordinators know he's coming. They scheme for him every week. Double teams, triple teams, chip blocks, slides. It doesn't matter. The incident didn't break Myles Garrett. It forged him into something even more dangerous. Which brings us to right now, the 2025 NFL season. Myles Garrett has done something that seemed impossible. 21.5 sacks. He needs just 1.5 more to tie the single season record of 22.5 held by Michael Strahan and TJ Watt. 1.5 sacks to make history. But here's the thing, the single season record isn't even the biggest prize. Bruce Smith holds the all-time career sack record, 200 sacks over 19 seasons. Myles Garrett, he has 124 sacks. At age 29, he's already the youngest player in NFL history to reach 100 career sacks. He's already passed Reggie White for most sacks before age 30. At his current pace, he won't just break Bruce Smith's record, he'll shatter it. Bruce Smith himself has been watching, saying if anyone's got a chance to do it, it would be Myles Garrett. It's so impressive. I'll make sure I'm in front of the TV to watch him play whenever I can. The kid who wrote poetry with his grandmother, the prospect that broke Clowney's record, the player who nearly lost everything in one terrible moment. He's about to become the greatest pass rusher in NFL history. Why? Because he subscribes to Gridiron. But don't just take my word for it. Let's look at the numbers and see how Myles Garrett stacks up against the best to ever do it. All right, let's settle this. Every time Myles Garrett's name comes up, so does TJ Watt. Steelers fans swear Watt is better. Browns fans say Garrett. The debate never ends. So let's end it and then ask a bigger question. Here's what the Watt debate comes down to. Garrett faces a 75.93% double team rate, the highest in the NFL. Watt's rate, 66.67. Despite facing more blockers, Garrett wins at a higher rate. Micah Parsons put it simply, the film does not lie. His presence is way more dominant than TJ Watt. Watt is a future Hall of Famer, but Garrett is doing more against more resistance. Case closed. Now let's zoom out. Because beating TJ Watt doesn't make you the greatest of all time. To make that case, you need to compare Garrett to the legends. Reggie White, Bruce Smith, DeMarcus Ware, Michael Strahan. So how does he stack up? Read the middle column. 0.95 sacks per game, the highest in NFL history. Garrett isn't just keeping pace with the legends, he's producing at a rate that makes Hall of Famers look ordinary. He's 12% more efficient than Reggie White, the minister of defense, the guy most people call the greatest rusher ever. He's 32% more efficient than Bruce Smith, the all-time sack leader. And he's doing it on teams that average 6.6 wins per season, while being double-teamed more than anyone. In a small market that nobody talks about. Look at everything working against him. Reggie White played for dominant Eagles and Packers teams. Bruce Smith went to 4 Super Bowls. Strahan had a Giants defense loaded with talent. Garrett, his rookie year, the Browns went 0-16. He's been double teamed more than anyone. He's played for losing teams his entire career. He's a defensive player in a league obsessed with offense. And despite all of that, he's the youngest to 100 sacks, has the most sacks before age 30, and the highest efficiency rate ever. The deck has been stacked against Myles Garrett from day one. He just keeps winning anyway. So, what's the scary truth that nobody's talking about? It's not just the efficiency numbers. Using the table, he's producing sacks at a higher rate than anyone who's ever played the game. When's the last time you saw Myles Garrett in a primetime commercial? When's the last time ESPN led SportsCenter with his highlights? When's the last time the national media treated him like what he is, the most dominant defensive player of his era? Why haven't we seen Myles Garrett talked about by some of the other creators? Because he plays for Cleveland. Because his teams keep losing. Because he won't get views. Because he's a defensive player in a league obsessed with quarterbacks. Because the Steelers have a bigger brand than the Browns. The most efficient pass rusher in NFL history has been hiding in plain sight. Joe Thomas, a Hall of Fame offensive lineman who knows dominance when he sees it, said it best. There's nobody that can compare to Myles Garrett. Nobody's played the position like that. Not only is he the most dominant player in today's game, but I think he's the most dominant defensive player ever. The most dominant defensive player ever. And the world is only just starting to realize it. Think about what we've learned today. A kid who won the genetic lottery but was shaped by a grandmother who taught him poetry at age 8. A teenager who hid his NBA brother's weed and never touched drugs or alcohol himself. A 5-star recruit who chose the SEC because he wanted to earn it the hard way. A player who committed attempted murder on national television and answered 4 straight first-team All-Pro seasons. A man who writes about vulnerability, dreams of studying dinosaurs, and refuses to kill wasps because everything on this earth has a purpose. And then he steps between the lines and becomes the most violent, efficient, unstoppable force the NFL has ever seen. That's not a contradiction, that's the source of his power. Grant taught him that you don't have to choose between being a warrior and being an artist. Muhammad Ali proved it was possible, and Myles Garrett is living it every single Sunday. The scary truth about Myles Garrett isn't his strength, it's not his speed, it's not even the records he's about to break, is that he's a poet in a predator's body, and the world has been sleeping on him his entire career. Not anymore. Speaking of players that are slept on, you might want to watch this video on how death became NFL dominance.